Red Bull's 2026 car just got banned, and what the FIA found inside will blow your mind. The floor didn't move. It didn't flex. But it reacted using vibrations from the new Ford engine to reshape airflow mid-corner. It was completely legal until the FIA saw the data. Then the rulebook changed overnight. Subscribe right now, because this ban doesn't just hit Red Bull. It could rewrite the entire future of Formula One before the first race even starts. Red Bull's 2026 Challenger, designed to launch the team into a new power unit era with Ford, has just been officially declared illegal by the FIA. And not because of something obvious, not a moving wing or a dodgy fuel sensor. No, the ban came after a groundbreaking discovery inside the most secretive part of the car, the underfloor structure. What the FIA found didn't just trigger a regulation review, it redefined what passive aerodynamics can legally achieve in modern Formula One. The system at the heart of the ban was hidden in plain sight. A high-frequency responsive floor that used vibrations from the Red Bull Ford V6 hybrid power unit to subtly alter how airflow was channeled underneath the car. This wasn't mechanical flex. It wasn't a hydraulic device. It was a material-based reaction embedded into the floor's composite layup. It operated without electronics, without actuators, and that's exactly what made it dangerous. Because it couldn't be seen. It could only be felt in the data. The trigger for the FIA's decision was a late-stage correlation test submitted during pre-homologation simulations. The data showed that under specific engine torque bands, the floor's aero map changed measurably, creating localized downforce increases in medium-speed corners. The car wasn't flexing. It was reacting. And under a newly revised interpretation of Article 3.7.2c, which now includes the phrase passively modulated aerodynamic structures, that's a breach. Red Bull had effectively crossed into a new design territory the rules were never meant to permit. Internally, the innovation was known as Project Echo, a joint development between Red Bull Advanced Technologies and Ford's Acoustic Engineering division. The floor featured embedded resonance-tuned microstructures that responded to harmonic loads in the 40-70 Hz range, the same frequency range generated by the power unit under transient throttle. That passive flex adjusted the pressure gradient beneath the diffuser just enough to create a downforce delta invisible in standard load tests, but devastatingly effective on corner entry. The advantage wasn't just mechanical. It was rhythmic. What makes this even more controversial is that Red Bull pre-cleared the structure with the FIA months ago. On paper, the materials were declared. The manufacturing methods were logged. The structure passed all standard flex tests. But what they didn't show, because they didn't have to, was how the floor behaved under full system vibration loads. Once the data became public, the FIA took less than 72 hours to issue a formal notice of non-compliance. The ruling, the floor constitutes a reactive aerodynamic device, and is now outlawed for 2026 and beyond. The timing of the decision couldn't be worse for Red Bull. This floor was the cornerstone of their 2026 platform, and more importantly, it was how they planned to compensate for the transition to an all-new and proven Ford power unit. Without it, they lose aero stability in the most energy-sensitive zones of the lap. That means changes to suspension setup, tire management strategy, and power deployment models. In other words, they're not just redesigning a part, they're rethinking the entire architecture of the car, with less than 2 months before physical build freeze. And for the rest of the grid, this ruling sends a shockwave. If a passive, engine-synced material design can now be classed as illegal, then the FIA is drawing a new line in how innovation is interpreted, not based on parts, but on intent. Red Bull's vision was bold. The execution was brilliant. But in Formula One, when you get too close to untouchable performance, the rulebook tends to catch up fast. What most fans don't know is that this wasn't the result of an on-track protest or post-race investigation. It started with a compliance anomaly during lab-based harmonic testing. As part of 2020's access stricter aerodynamic certification process, all teams were required to submit full system load response data, not just under vertical pressure but also under vibrational and torsional frequency loads. Red Bull's submission revealed a pattern that raised eyebrows: a consistent airflow advantage correlated to specific engine torque cycles. That wasn't a fluke. That was design. At the center of this innovation was a layered composite structure embedded into the underfloor midsection, where traditional flex tests are almost meaningless. But this wasn't about flex. It was about frequency. The floor incorporated tuned microstructures designed with Ford's acoustic engineers that responded to engine-induced vibrations. When the car entered a corner at partial throttle, the energy transferred through the engine mounts caused those materials to resonate ever so slightly. That resonance didn't bend the floor, it altered airflow paths by redirecting pressure zones beneath the diffuser. What made it so powerful was that it didn't require any active system to function. No sensors. No software. No mechanical link. The effect was natural, completely passive, and yet it mimicked what an active aero system might accomplish: dynamic downforce in the corners, without drag on the straights. In technical terms, Red Bull had created a harmonic aero amplifier. Something the sport had never seen, and something the rulebook had never been forced to define. This wasn't just a clever tweak, it was a performance cornerstone. Data from Red Bull's closed-loop simulations suggested that the system generated an average of 120 to 150 newtons of additional vertical load at 180 kilometers per hour without increasing drag. That translated to nearly 3/10 per lap at circuits like Interlagos and Singapore, not through more power, but through aero stability and mid-corner control. For a team adjusting to a new engine architecture with Ford, that advantage was a lifeline. And now, it's gone. The FIA's ruling came quickly once full system correlation was confirmed. According to sources close to the FIA's technical working group, the decision hinged on one principle: if an aerodynamic surface changes its behavior as a function of engine load, even without mechanical movement, it may now be considered non-compliant. That interpretation has existed in theory before, but this is the first time it's been applied to material response, not mechanical parts. And that sets a precedent that could impact every team on the grid. Behind the scenes, other teams were already investigating similar systems, though no one had reached Red Bull's level of refinement. Aston Martin reportedly tested a floor with variable stiffness zones, while Mercedes explored frequency-dampening ribs in early 2025. But only Red Bull tied their design to engine harmonics in a way that produced meaningful gains. Their mistake, if it can be called that, was proving that it worked. The more reliable the data became, the easier it was for the FIA to classify it as a threat. And now the door has closed. The FIA isn't just banning a material or a shape, they're banning a conceptual pathway. Passive aero systems that derive performance from vibration or internal energy flow are now under scrutiny, even if they don't move or change shape in any visible way. For Red Bull, that's a bitter pill. They created something new, something brilliant, and instead of being allowed to race it, they've been told, that's too clever, too soon. And in Formula One, that's often all it takes to end a revolution before it begins. Red Bull didn't just lose a floor design. They lost a philosophy, a window into what Formula One could become if innovation was judged by brilliance, not fear. This wasn't about breaking rules. It was about reshaping them, forcing the FIA to decide whether F1 is still a place where genius can survive. And this week, that answer became painfully clear. The brilliance of the system was that it didn't move. It didn't cheat. It didn't require electronics, oil burns, or clever actuators. It was pure engineering. It took a known weakness, vibration, and turned it into a competitive advantage. That's the kind of thinking that used to define champions. But now, it's the kind of thinking that gets banned before a wheel ever turns. Inside Milton Keynes, the mood is sharp. Engineers who thought they had outsmarted the system the right way are now being told they went too far, not because they broke the rules, but because they exploited a space that the rules hadn't yet understood. That's not a technical penalty. That's a philosophical one. And for a team built on relentless technical evolution, it cuts deeper than any grid drop ever could. This decision is more than a one-off ban. It marks a shift in how the sport views creativity. For decades, Formula One celebrated the minds who saw solutions where others saw walls: Gordon Murray, Adrian Newey, Ross Brawn. But today, that culture feels different. Today, the message is, if your idea changes the game will change to stop it. And now, every team on the grid is watching. Watching how the FIA reacted. Watching how a legal system can become illegal with a single directive. And more importantly, watching how success, when achieved too efficiently, invites scrutiny that failure never does. This was never about whether Red Bull cheated. It was about whether they got too close to perfection. Even the fans, especially those who followed the sport through its technical golden eras, can sense what's been lost. This wasn't just about one part. It was about possibility. About seeing a team take a risk not with money or politics, but with intelligence. And seeing that intelligence get punished not because it deceived, but because it revealed something uncomfortable, that the rulebook isn't built to handle quiet genius. So now, as Red Bull regroups and the rest of the paddock breathes a little easier, one question hangs heavy in the air: when innovation succeeds in silence, who decides when it's too much? Because today, the FIA answered. And that answer changed more than just Red Bull's 2026 car. It changed how far any team will dare to think.